Hi everyone, this is my informational interview with Doug Lacy of BekTek LLC, a forensic audio video image consulting firm based out of Virginia. BekTek provides consulting work for clients worldwide, both in civil and criminal cases. Doug received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Miami in 1996 in electrical audio engineering and hopes to work on post-production film scores, particularly at Skywalker Ranch. Soon after realizing this wasn't as attainable as he had hoped, he pursued work in law enforcement, specifically with the FBI. It wasn't until years after he left the FBI that he decided to pursue a master's degree from CU Denver to keep his educational background and research updated and fresh. Doug's work history, both in and out of the FBI, is quite extensive and impressive, having worked on many cases during his 7-year tenure at the FBI. Within that 7 years, Doug has examined audio and video from a few high-profile cases. Some of these high-profile cases included analyzing audio from United Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania on September 11, 2001. It was interesting to hear how NTSB recovered two black boxes at the crash site, one with flight data and the other with voice recordings. The voice recordings black box turned out to be damaged, so Doug mentioned he and another colleague had to fly out to Washington State to the manufacturer's location in an attempt to fix the connector pins. And they were able to successfully fix the pins, and Doug was one of the first to hear and analyze the voice recordings from the cockpit of Flight 93. Another high-profile case was the impeachment trial of President Bill Clinton. Doug flew out to Linda Tripp's personal residence at the time to analyze recorded tapes that Linda had produced of her conversations with Monica Lewinsky. He mentioned they created copies of the recordings, which were lengthy and took more time to analyze than expected. Doug's role was to make test recordings for the case. He also briefly mentioned flying out to Ukraine to testify on war crimes, as well as providing expertise on the Duke Lacrosse sexual assault trial. Doug was invited to work with BekTek while still employed by the FBI. However, he mentioned there were some limitations in place before he could take on work in the private sector, including a commitment to not work on any criminal cases or any cases that involved the FBI. Doug stated that after 9/11, the FBI changed its work expectations of agents and it wasn't the same, which prompted him to seek out work in the private sector full-time. Doug's buddy Bruce was the owner at BekTek at the time and mentioned to Doug that he would transfer ownership of the firm once he retires, and Doug is now the owner of BekTek and does full-time consulting work. I asked Doug what a typical day looks like, and he mentioned mostly lengthy phone calls, casework, and backlogs. He said he spends a good amount of time having to catch clients up to speed on the technology methods and what that process is like. One of the main challenges he mentioned is managing expectations of clients from him and what he is capable of doing. He often stresses the importance that clients have the most optimal form of the recording and to be sure there is minimal loss of quality if exported or compressed. He used an example of an attempt to get a license plate number off a surveillance footage camera, but surveillance videos are often too pixelated, so much so he is unable to even get one letter or number. I asked if video quality is more often than not of lesser quality, and he said that would be true. I was interested to hear about the differences in time it takes to analyze different forms of media. He mentioned that video typically takes more time due to the rendering process, which can take hours at a time. However, he stated that he is able to work on other tasks during this time and he often will not bill clients for what he called machine time. I asked Doug if he has worked more on one type of media than the other, and he stated he's received more audio analyzing requests than any other form of media. During his time at the FBI, Doug mentioned he had an abundance of resources available to him, such as software, which, if requested, would be available to him the next day. Comparing that to the private sector, he stated he is much more conscious of overhead costs and costs/benefits of certain softwares, which can be incredibly expensive. Another thing he mentioned about this is a drawback of working alone rather than with 4 or 5 people all working on the same tasks. It is a little more difficult to ask for second opinions on a task if you get stuck. Lastly, Doug mentioned Lastly, Doug provided some insight into AAFS, such as the weekly schedule, what past conferences were like, and I asked if he usually attends each year. He said he did until COVID, which prompted it to go virtual, then into a hybrid format, and now this year is fully in person, or this upcoming year is fully in person. Um, I definitely look forward to meeting him there and getting to talk a little more about his past employment history and maybe further insight into media forensics.